Welcome to the February 8th episode of Reactive Consciousness, our in-depth podcast about what happened this week in our lives. I am your host, OldManStompy, and this is...
Lotus Prince.
I was not lying 2 days ago. It is still just the two of us.
Whoa. So, OldManStompy delivers.
Thankfully, I deliver what I promise on. So, we've got a couple topics of relative importance. You might have heard there was something really interesting in competitive sports going on this past Sunday. I am, of course, talking about the Magic the Gathering Pro Tour.
Oh, I thought it was going to be the Puppy Bowl.
Oh, yeah, that too. I saw that on Jimmy Fallon. It's pretty cute. So, the only reason I want to bring up the Magic Pro Tour, not that that's really what we want to talk about, but I thought you would find this interesting. It was won by a deck called Lantern Control. So if you're not familiar with what this is, there's a card called Lantern of Insight, and it's a one-mana artifact. It just says, so you can sacrifice it to have both players shuffle their library. It seems pretty mundane. And both players play with the top card of their library revealed.
Ooh.
All right? So now imagine your deck is full of millstones.
Oh, no.
So
wow. Yeah, explain that real quick.
So Millstone is a card that says, it costs 2, and it says tap, target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. So the idea is, you're always looking at what you and your opponent are drawing at all times. So if you manage to assemble a bunch of cards that have this same function, if your opponent's about to draw, and it looks like they're going to draw a good card, you just have them put it in their graveyard. And if you're about to draw a bad card, then you can put it in your graveyard, so maybe you'll draw a better one.
Yeah,
so what usually happens is, once this lock... So, there's usually a few turns where the opponent is, desperately struggling to avoid this, lock, where they know that once the Lantern Control player gets enough of their artifacts into play, they'll basically never draw a useful card for the entire rest of the game.
That's vicious.
There are other aspects of this, for example, they have to play a card to prevent your opponent from attacking. And there's usually 1 or 2 cards in there that prevent you from just getting lightning bolted to the face until you die.
Yeah.
There's it's a pretty complicated lock, and there's always this tension between establishing the lock and once they have some of the pieces in play, then you know that the number of outs in your deck has diminished considerably. But you still need to draw them, and you're just watching all of these cards go into your graveyard, hoping that the next one they let you have is actually something useful. And it's just a miserable fucking deck to play. And usually you'd think that a deck that does nothing but just very, very slowly kill you one card at a time would actually get banned for time reasons at a tournament. But if you think about it, the actual turns are not that long. It's you don't really do anything.
That's true. Your turn.
Neither player does anything. You just look at the top of the deck, and if it's something that you like, that looks good, or that looks like you want your opponent to draw, then you just don't do anything, and you let them deck themselves by drawing their whole deck over time. And it won the entire Pro Tour.
Wow.
And so, we had to watch this guy fucking mill everybody, one card at a time.
That's
for,
so
8...
painful.
Well, I mean, not every round is constructed to the Pro Tour, but it was for a long fucking time. And these rounds, they take a long fucking time, right? Because it's not a... I mean, it's not a time-consuming kill, but it's a slow and painful-looking kill.
It is, yeah.
And Lantern Control has been well established as the villain in this particular format. The deck started out as a joke. Somebody literally just went on a forum, which is not well known for being a home for potential deck builders, and the guy just said, "What's something that I can do in this format that stops my opponent from ever playing Magic?"
That's great.
And people will give him all these suggestions, oh, you can do this and this and this. And he's like, no, these cards allow my opponent to do something. I want my opponent to just do absolutely nothing for the entire round. How can I help myself do that?
That's insane.
And it became this fucking monster that is capable of taking down a tournament. I mean, it requires the right metagame because, a burn deck is actually a pretty bad matchup a lot of the time for these decks. And you have to be pretty skilled to make sure that you get your lock into place and to have good judgment in terms of what is and is not a good card for your opponent to draw. It's much harder to play than it looks like. But it's not fun to work through if you're playing against it. So Lantern Control has won its first very, very large tournament, and it has firmly established itself as the villain of Magic.
That's terrifying.
Much like the New England Patriots have established themselves as the quintessential villains of the NFL.
The thing is, I've heard that there's a lot of bad blood about the Patriots, but where did they get that reputation from?
So, I mean, first off, people don't like, the same team to win every year after year, just because it's boring. You start to root for the underdog. People like a good underdog story.
Wait, because otherwise there is no story. It's like, let me guess, is this guy's going to win again?
Yeah, I mean, typically, like the job, like part of the reason why I got back into wrestling was because I was tired of the idea that like between the league and the sports journalists, people were always trying to like force this narrative onto sports, which is supposed to be about athletes performing against each other at the highest possible level of competition and winning fairly. And like once you start making it all about the narrative, you wind up always questioning like, well, if a referee made a questionable call,
it's just a TV show.
Yeah, are they trying to make it more interesting because they got like it was always like an open secret, for example, in the NBA that star players got preferential treatment from the referees all the time, and it was really frustrating if one team had a megastar but like a lesser supporting cast, and the other team was like a more coherent team. And like a lot of the time they'd be evenly matched, but the team with the megastar would always get preferential treatment because that guy was always getting protected. So in the NFL, Tom Brady kind of has that reputation, and a lot of these guys, he's the quarterback of the New England Patriots, which means he's the field general, so to speak, of the team. He coordinates most of the offense, and over the years, him and like Peyton Manning, a lot of these other guys who have also become like media spokespeople in their spare time when they're not NFL quarterbacks. The rules have slowly been adjusted in the NFL to favor quarterbacks, to make it more difficult to sack a quarterback, to make it more difficult to defend a receiver who's about to catch a pass. So like it's made the game more high scoring, and it's continued to protect these guys who are like top flight quarterbacks and sort of skew the game in their favor, which doesn't like make anybody like Tom Brady anymore. It doesn't make you want to root for Tom Brady anymore, knowing the league is behind him. Another issue is that I'm not saying that other teams don't do this, but the Patriots have been known to like outright cheat.
Oh, really?
So you've heard about the Deflategate thing?
Maybe the name, but I don't know if I know what it is.
So I know Mr. Yu knows about this just because like the news headlines surrounding this were fucking hilarious.
Oh.
But the idea was that the balls in the NFL have a certain pressure they're supposed to be inflated to, and the Patriots, they were just taking the balls and taking them into after they were examined by the referees or the umpires. The Patriots officials were taking them into like a bathroom and like letting the air out a little bit, so that Brady had an easier time gripping the football and like throwing a pass, and it would throw off the opposing quarterback too because they didn't know this was happening.
Well, that's the thing, like. It sounds like who's gonna notice, but if this is all you do, you will feel a difference. Like this is kind of gonna sound corny because it's like it's tying this to fucking shopping for video games. I'm a fucking nerd, but like it's come to the point where like when I pick up some game at GameStop, I can just tell whether it has a manual in it because they're not exactly heavy, but they do have weight, and you can feel it.
And you're sad when they don't have it, right? Because we miss manuals.
Yeah, especially if it's a PS2 game where it should have a manual. And I'm like, oh, well, it's missing one. Yeah.
Exactly. So the Patriots, they play in close to Boston, where it's usually really cold between September and February, which is the scope of the football season. So I think the excuse they would always make was that, it's just cold. Like, because cold air is denser than warm air. So they would say, we took the balls were observed. They were measured originally indoors by the umpires, and then, they just got cold and they deflated. That's why they feel different. So that's
that sounds like okay, but like how come only at Patriots games?
Well, eventually, another major quarterback got the league to investigate, and they discovered that yes, in fact, the Patriots.
Oh wow!
It's like one of their attendants wasn't, and Tom Brady actually got suspended for a few games, I think. And they called it Deflategate, and it led to all these hilarious headlines where it says like Brady quote, "I didn't see the balls before I touched them the first time."
Yeah, of course. Yeah, like letting the air out of the balls in the bathroom. Like, yeah.
So yeah, exactly.
That is
on
kind
top
of funny,
of that,
though.
like before
seeing it in an official newspaper, that is pretty funny.
Yeah, I saw it on ESPN and like CNN, all these other major news networks.
That is pretty funny.
It's hilarious, and so it was all about Tom Brady and his balls for like months on end until he got suspended for a few games as a result of it. And also they were like taping other teams' practices, and so that they would be able to like see all the plays they were planning on running for the future and get a little bit of extra intelligence.
I see.
Which is also like illegal under the rules of the NFL. So
Well, I remember
again,
Yakuza 5, I think, like had a whole subplot about that. Like like baseball players like observing and interpreting other teams' signs.
Yeah, that is like a real that's a real problem that can happen in baseball. For example, like teams in baseball use hand signs to communicate with one another.
Yeah, that's what it was.
And so like you're allowed to like look at the signs for another player, but a lot of the time if they catch you doing it on the field, the pitcher will just hit you with a ball. It'll just like throw at your head.
Yeah.
So it's definitely if you're like recording it from the dugout, that's definitely against the rules.
That's where the subplot was going. Like like spying from like the stands and stuff like that.
I'm not surprised that exists in Yakuza. Like Japanese baseball, like is a pretty big deal, and
yeah, one of the guys you play as in 5 is like an ex-professional baseball player, so he knows all about like these kinds of shady practices that have happened. It's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, and also like you know how I get made fun of because I always seem to have something that ties like a story back into wrestling. Like it's becoming you've played so many of these Yakuza games and you have so much to say about them all the time that it's become that like let's see what Kazuma Kiryu has to say about the opera.
Well, it's kind of like what I used to do. I used to find excuses to work JoJo in, and before 2012, when it kind of became mainstream in America, it seemed like these are like these weird esoteric references you're making. Even though it's like the most popular thing in Japan, in America it was kind of still pretty underground, so it's like you're referencing JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, like, okay, weirdo. Yeah, like Yakuza has also... Like, Yakuza wasn't around in America the whole time, but I think it's only more recently it's become kind of... It's getting more of a following. The PS2 games, I don't remember people talking about them when they were out, like when they were the new ones. Like, I think it was like starting in maybe 4 where they actually kind of got like more noticed.
Well, some of it was also that they came out like we were never expecting to get the first 2 Yakuza games originally, right? Because they came out right at the end of the PS2's lifespan. I think Yakuza 2 might have been like one of the last PS2 games besides the shovelware style titles like the Madden games.
Yeah, 2 is the most expensive game in the series as a result. It's like $60 still for a PS2 game in 2017, 2018. Like that's like actually a big deal.
Yep, it's an excellent game too.
It's probably story-wise, it might be my favorite in the series. That's why I'm so excited about Kiwami 2. Like a more playable Yakuza 2. Like, oh man, out of my way.
I remember I got my wife to watch Yakuza 3 because I told her that Yakuza 2 was like a Korean drama, like in the way that it tells its story, and it literally is kind of a Korean drama.
Dude, Yakuza 2 though, like, but wait, this was happening. But actually, wait, you didn't know about this. Like the end of 2 has so many like reveals, it borders on self-parody.
Right, and then the ending is like exactly what the game has been leading up to, and is very satisfying.
Yeah, that was incredible.
So yeah, what was your thoughts? Did you watch any of the Super Bowl?
I only saw the very end. I'm generally not interested in football, and even when the Super Bowl comes, I'm just like, well, this is what Twitter is going to be talking about for the next however many hours. But I came down. It was near the end of the game, and it was actually close, and there was like 2 minutes left on the clock. I was like, I'll see this out. Like, I know I missed like the whole game, but like I'll see if anything happens at the end because there was still time. Like at the time, the Patriots were winning by I forgot how many points, but like less than a touchdown's worth. So if the Patriots, or the Eagles were winning by less than a touchdown's worth. So if the Patriots scored, then they would be in the lead. So the Eagles managed to They didn't score another touchdown, but they made a kick for a field goal, which really cemented their victory. And all they basically had to do was just run out the clock for 2 minutes, and that was actually pretty exciting. Yep. Like, will they win? I don't know. And this is something I didn't know until after, but the Eagles have never won a Super Bowl, so this was the first time in history. Like, again, I don't personally like care about like which team win, but like on principle, like that's really cool.
So yeah, I've heard that Philadelphia has just been absolutely rioting for the last like couple days. I've heard that like there's a thing where Philadelphia Eagles fans will like climb telephone poles and the police were actually like shooting them down with fire hoses.
Really? The thing is though, like I know Philly has their reputation, but some posts I've seen on Facebook and Twitter were like, yes, there are some nuts, but reports of this chaos are generally exaggerated. Like the town is not a smoking crater. There are some idiots who are climbing poles and shit, but like it's not like a war zone.
I mean, compare that to like Boston when the Red Sox won their first World Series in like 80 years or whatever, where people were overturning cars and somebody actually died in the rioting.
Oh shit! Well, there was an overturned car in Philly actually.
Okay, well, I mean, I expect that to happen once in a while.
Yeah.
I expect that to be like an outlying event in a riot of that size. But yeah, like it's kind of exciting. I know Vice is a big Philly fan, so that was part of the reason why he wasn't able to record the podcast last night. Really, not just because he's an asshole. Like he really did. He really does have an excuse this time, so we'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it was a really well played game. Both offenses, like Tom Brady and Nick Foles, are fantastic quarterbacks. Like if you would actually watch the game, so it's harder than it looks, even harder than it looks, to throw a pass to a receiver in the NFL. Like it's not just a matter of throwing it where you expect him to be and getting it around the defender. You know, if you look at like the lines of sight from the quarterback's perspective, you know, you have this.
Yeah, everyone's
this defense...
trying to jump on them immediately.
Well, it's also that like if you're just the quarterback dropping back from the offensive line, you know, you have this like defensive line that's like right in front of you, and you have to throw the ball over them. You know, but also like low enough that it maintains like the trajectory to get to the receiver as fast as it possibly can.
And that's what also impresses me about Hail Marys. Like, how do you calculate where it's going to land? And like the thing is, this is what gets me every single time. You never throw it to the person you're throwing it to. Like you throw it to where you expect them to be, and it usually works. Which is, and even if it doesn't work, like they would have caught it if somebody didn't interfere. Like that's crazy. Like I don't know how these people do it.
Mm-hmm. It's exceptional when these guys manage to throw the ball like right into the receiver's like chest area, like right into his arms.
Yeah, like the bullet, like straight horizontal throw.
Yeah. While that guy is running at full speed down the field, possibly covered by one or two guys.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
In oftentimes an open stadium, which means there's wind on top of that. Although the Super Bowl is usually played in a dome. So
yeah, this was in a dome, and by the way, good fucking thing it was because it was 7 degrees Fahrenheit outside.
Yeah, well, they would not have put it in Minnesota if it wasn't in a dome. Yeah. They usually try to get a very temperate field for the Super Bowl.
Come on.
I mean, you've got like 80,000 people who are coming to the game most of the time, many of whom are not like major football fans. A lot of the time they're... Well, I mean... We did
for the Super Bowl, though, Super Bowl tickets are like, what, $1 million? Like, you gotta be something of a football fan.
They're not $1 million.
Super Bowl tickets are a big deal.
Maybe the court side, well, the field level ones are, but like that's one of the worst places to watch. Like field level at my dad's told me this. He's been to a bunch of football games in the past, like for teams like the Jets and the Giants, who aren't always that great, so it's easier to get tickets than you'd think, especially the Jets. But like, if
my aunt and uncle are hardcore Jets fans too, so it's like,
but
they know.
So actually, there's a line in Danganronpa V3 where one of the Monokuma characters is like, it's the Jets here, fuck the Patriots. Like that's a very dated line.
That's pretty. Well, it was like The Simpsons, the Hank Scorpio episode where Homer gets the Denver Broncos.
Oh yeah, and it's not funny anymore because they've won several Super Bowls since then.
Yeah, because they're like, oh, the Denver Broncos, and apparently they won the Super Bowl like that year too. So it's like, whoops.
Right, because they had John Elway at the time, who was a great quarterback.
He's a legend. Like, even I've heard of him.
Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. You were talking about. I'm sorry. You were talking about actually attending the game, and your dad was talking about courtside seats.
Oh yeah. Thanks for getting me back on track. So yeah, he was at field level at midfield, the 50-yard line, and it's quite difficult from there to see like what's going on the end zones, which is actually where like the most interesting action tends to happen when you're like
it's like being at the movie theater. Like if you're in the front row seats, you can't see shit. Like you see like the bottom center of the screen. Like you actually kind of want to be a little back.
Right.
I mean, maybe the player will run into you. Like maybe you could like touch the player if you're at midfield front row, but like watching the game is another story.
Not even really that, because there's an awful lot of like rows of equipment and like other players and stuff. Like it's actually really far from.
You can talk to the camera guy.
From the fields. Yeah, you can talk to whoever controls the boom mic or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can have a good time. We didn't watch that much of the game ourselves. We were actually playing Codenames with Mr. Ryu. He came over for a little bit.
Oh, cool.
Just because like I guess nobody else was free that day. They were all watching the Super Bowl. Like the funny thing though was that like my mother, we were at my parents' house, me and Minty Mitz. We were hanging out, we were visiting my family, and my mother is celiac, so like very seriously celiac. So we have to be very careful about what kind of outside food we bring into the house, and like even when we personally eat, just because things like our phones and like my DS or whatever might be contaminated with like gluten particles, like we have to be really careful where we put our stuff too. So like Mr. Ryu calls us up and he's like, "Hey, can I come hang out for a little bit? I heard you guys are watching the Super Bowl. I just wanna like hang out." And so I was like, well, you can't, like, bring any food, you can't, like, bring any things, we can't go anywhere, you can't really do anything but sit in the family room and maybe we can play a game. But if you're okay with all that stuff, if you really, really want to see us, I guess you can come over. And I realized I kind of made it sound like we just didn't want him at all.
Yeah, that's kind of funny.
It's like, well...
But then joke's on you, he showed up anyway.
Yeah, he did actually show up anyway. At
that point, he shows up out of spite.
He passed the test.
Yeah.
I opened the door, but I was like, what's the password? The password is Animal Crossing is amazing.
Son of a bitch! Just leaves.
He's like, got me again. So actually, like, we played Codenames on the same team, me and Mr. Ryu, and we won like the first 3 games against Minty Mitz and my sister. And I was just like, whoa, we're 3-0. We must be Team Animal Crossing. You guys are Team Monster Hunter. And then he quit my team. He changed.
Yeah, he's the kind of person who would do that. Like, that's it, change everything.
This has been going on for like quite some time. I actually, on that business trip that I mentioned during Corrective Consciousness, where I had to go, where I was like playing the Animal Crossing event, I did during like one of the happy hours after one of the work days, I met one of the like the division leaders. It's in programming you have what's called a Scrum Master. Their job is basically to make sure that people who are working on different parts of a module, like in programming, are all doing their job. Basically, they hold people accountable. So I was talking to the Scrum Master, and I took out my phone, and he was like, "Oh, are you playing the new Animal Crossing game?" And I was like, "Yes, I've found another convert." And so we're talking about the game, and he's like, "I haven't really like I played it for a little while when it came out, but I really like to play as Monster Hunter." And I was like, "You've got to be fucking kidding me!"
And it turns out Mr. Ryu had been feeding him information the whole time.
That would be less funny than if he just came up with that on his own.
I know that is pretty great though. That's like something like a TV show. Like, well, I can't escape it.
I know. So it's like at work, so I can't really say what's on my mind at the time. But also
disgusting pleb.
But also it's a happy hour, so I can't. I've been drinking a little bit, so I'm just like I have to tell you a story about this person I know back in New Jersey.
That's great.
And I appreciate that he like actually listened to the whole stupid story instead of just firing me.
But instead of just firing me, but I do just love that idea. They're like, Animal Crossing's okay, but what I really want to play, like that's fantastic.
So yeah, he was excited about Monster Hunter World. Not that it has anything to do with what we're talking about today. And that was the end of the story. I never talked to him again. Yeah. Walked off into the sunset, burned the whole fucking place down.
Yeah, he like shows up to work one day. Did you know that there's a Monster Hunter on the 3DS? Like, son of a bitch. He's just playing it right in front of you.
Yes, I'm sure he knows that. Although, to be fair, he did redeem himself by saying that he wanted to know if we would like to have a Dance Dance Revolution pad in the office to play.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty nice.
And then he brings in like the PS1 pad.
he brings in a copy of Monster Hunter. It's like, while you're here,
I want to see where this originates from, and even he doesn't have a good time.
Exactly. Anyway, that was our Super Bowl show. So I guess there's one more thing I'd like to talk about for this week.
I guess I will. Before you do get to the next thing, though, I just want to say I'm happy that both teams had fun.
Both teams played hard.
You both had very good hustle.
I'm not sure that Tom Brady had a lot of fun. Did you see the picture of him leaving the game? He had this like big fur coat on with like glasses.
I did see that. I thought that was from like. I didn't realize that was actually from the Super Bowl. I thought that was from something else. Like somebody found like a funny picture of Tom Brady because he lost the Super Bowl. Let's find this picture of it and it matches. I can't believe it's like actually from right there.
I thought that was from. I was led to believe that was from the Super Bowl. Yeah. I heard it on the internet. How could it possibly be wrong?
Like I actually saw a really funny picture. Like he was in the fur coat with the big sunglasses and the headphones, and it was like it was like the meme had the caption of something that was like, in retail or whatever, like he's super successful. He definitely want to talk to your manager or something. He had that look about him. It was pretty funny.
Yes, Tom Brady is that kind of guy. It's easy to put words in Tom Brady's mouth. He's very corporate. That's part of why it's so difficult to root for him if you're not already a Patriots fan. So yeah, speaking of people who are difficult to root for, the the WWF Royal Rumble was a couple weeks ago, and as expected, Roman Reigns was the favorite to win this year. So
he was the favorite?
He's always the favorite all the time in every match.
But wasn't he? Maybe I'm getting the wrong wrestler. Maybe I'm misremembering this. But wasn't he like the most hated man alive when he beat the Undertaker?
He was, but like that's part of the point. Like they're trying to change his character a little bit from being a generic babyface to being a generic badass.
Okay.
That means like taking your lumps and being hated by the crowd a little bit, and not really. There's actually there's a Boom Comics imprint, so they do a WWE comic book, and they did a little storyline. So his first promo after he beat the Undertaker. I mean, the first week he didn't say anything because the crowd was literally just chanting "fuck you" for like 10 minutes.
Just let it blow over.
Yeah. So the next week when he came out to a slightly more neutral crowd, his thing was like, I'm not a good guy. I'm not a bad guy. I'm the guy. You know,
nice. I'm the guy with the gun. What?
Yeah. So like then it also gave like a really natural like lead in for his opponent, the heel, to be like, well, if you're the guy, well, I'm the man. You know, so like
whatever. That's so immature.
I know, but like the heels are often like a little bit immature, and you're supposed to be able to take the piss out of them a little bit.
Fair enough, because I was gonna say that's pretty petty. It's like whatever. But, well, I'm double the guy. Like okay, like,
I'm the bigger guy.
Yeah, times infinity.
I'm the guyer.
The Guyver. Whoa.
So for people who are unfamiliar with the Royal Rumble, it's actually like literally my favorite match in all of WWF. Like the idea is, you start with two guys in the ring, and then every 90 seconds, a new guy comes out.
That's crazy.
Until you get to 30. And you get eliminated by being tossed over the top rope. So you have all these like really wacky interactions between guys who just never have reason to come face-to-face in the course of a WWF storyline. And on top of that, it's conceivable that anybody could win, because you never have to take a pinfall or submission. You just get knocked over the top rope.
There could be someone who just gets lucky and like, oh, got you, like when you weren't looking, over the rope.
So they do this all the time. There's always like one like F-list wrestler who gets a surprising elimination just because it's so easy to knock somebody off the top rope if they're not paying attention. Yeah. And that happens. Like that was one of the first big storylines of the Royal Rumble. There's a nobody. So James Ellsworth is not in it. He actually is. I was
actually thinking James Ellsworth. I was like, please.
He's wrapped up his time with the WWF. He left a few months ago. I guess they just ran out of things for him to do. Like this, as cool as his storyline was, there's only so many places you can take a guy who has no character besides being the bottom of the barrel and having no chin. Like that's
and having no chin.
For what it was, he like exceeded beyond his like wildest fucking dreams. Who the hell knew that he was going to get actual like WWF title matches? You know,
yeah.
Like that's absurd. But like imagine you personally walked into like a stadium where they were hosting a WWF live event.
Yeah, that's the thing. I work out for a couple months and then I join WWF and they say yes. Like what?
And they give you a title match.
It's bonkers.
Like a few months later, they hire you back. It's unbelievable. But no, he was not in this match. The current F-list guy is this guy by the name of Heath Slater, who's been F-list for years, so long that it's really part of his character that he's like the Yamcha of WWE.
That's kind of great.
So like he was coming out, he was like 5th or something, and one of the heels had just gotten eliminated, like obviously really early on because there weren't too many people in the match. And as the heel's like stomping up the ring all mad, he just like clotheslines Heath Slater and knocks him out. So Slater, he
got knocked out before even getting into the ring.
He never makes it to the ring at number 5. So the next 3 or 4 guys to come out are all heels, and as they come out 6, 7, 8, they just like kick him again while he's down. And like he slowly starts rolling towards the ring because people just keep kicking him on the ramp while they're like walking to the ring.
Genius.
It's so fucking funny. I couldn't stand it. And so he finally gets into the ring. Like one heel finally says, well, he's close enough to the ring, I'm just going to toss him in and eliminate him. And so this guy comes out and throws him into the ring, gets in the ring, Slater like stumbles to his feet, like trips, and just like knocks the guy out.
Oh, that basically is Dragon Ball. Like, remember when, oh my god, when Kame was posing as that like dweeb human in the tournament?
Oh yeah,
and he beats people by tripping and stumbling into them and knocking them out, and like just trying to hide his power. It's like that. Like he just accidentally KOs like everybody.
But this, if I'm not mistaken, he didn't like Heath Slater didn't like trip. He actually like wound up.
Oh,
but nonetheless, like he did he did like eliminate this other heel who was just expecting to throw him in the ring and toss him out like immediately. And
so the guy brought about his own demise.
It wound up being historical because it's actually the shortest time to elimination.
Oh, like steps in, boom, eliminated somebody.
He tosses Heath Slater in, steps in. As he's stepping in, Heath Slater gets up and kicks him out. So he was in the ring for 0.8 seconds, which is the fastest elimination in Rumble history. So yeah, the rest of the match was generally pretty good. We had no major surprises. So last year the big thing was that they had Goldberg and The Undertaker and Brock Lesnar. Like they were the centerpiece that the Rumble was built around. And of course Roman Reigns came out and he got booed a lot and he eliminated The Undertaker, set up their match at WrestleMania.
Sure.
But he didn't win. But there's always this like threat that Roman Reigns is basically always the favorite in every match that he's in, which is part of the reason, again, like the Patriots, they're always at the top of the game. It's hard to root for them. You always know that like any given moment might wind up being Roman Reigns' moment, which sort of squeezes out the space for everybody else. Yeah. And you just kind of want to root for somebody else to get a little time in the spotlight. So Reigns, he came out, I think he was somewhere close to the end. I don't remember the exact number, but he was around in the Rumble for a pretty long while. And, you know, nobody is rooting for him to win. And he's only, I think, at this point won a single Royal Rumble. So they definitely left him in for a long time to create some dramatic tension that he might actually win. Like, he's supposed to be a face, but they put him in because they know that people will be happy if he loses.
That's pretty great.
Which is great because it means they finally embraced that part of his character. That sort of like literally somebody had a sign in the stands that said like Roman Reigns eats Tide Pods.
Come on.
Like they just completely turned on him. It wound up being won by Shinsuke Nakamura, so who's like this big Japanese star who got signed a couple of years ago, around the same time as AJ Styles. He's got a great entrance theme, but he's got a lot of charisma, but otherwise not a lot of personality because his English just isn't good enough for him to give like a really great promo.
Sure.
So he's got like these incredibly charismatic mannerisms, and he's like hilarious in the ring.
Well, actually, so there is one thing though. I don't know how well this would be received, but have they ever considered just running with it and just giving him having him speak in Japanese and just do subtitles? Like he's the Japanese guy.
I mean, they do that sometimes, but it's still not going to make as much money as someone speaking in English.
No, that's true.
To the audience. It just adds this extra barrier where you have to read stuff going on the screen.
Yeah.
Like, sure, it would be great. Like, I would love to like... They do that occasionally, but oftentimes it's a heel move, you know, because the audience gets frustrated not being able to understand what the person is saying.
Yeah, ironically, the audience is the heel.
It also doesn't really play well for a live audience.
That's a good point. Yeah, that is a big problem.
Right. So
you have to look at the screen and not like the ring.
Exactly. I mean, like even when I'm watching like Dragon Ball Super or something, knowing that I have to read the subtitles and not pay too much attention to the action is a little bit like distracting.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but usually they'll give one of those characters like a manager, and the manager will do all the interviews for them. They haven't given Shinsuke Nakamura a manager yet.
Okay.
I will but he tells a good story just with his gestures, like you know how John Cena has the like "you can't see me" meme?
Yeah, that wave like hand in front of the face.
He still plays to that meme like in the ring. So like he was having a match with Nakamura, and Nakamura comes charging at him, and Cena just steps out of the way, and he does the gesture like "haha, you can't see me." Mm-hmm. And so Nakamura he like rubs his eyes like "whoa," like
it's so dumb.
Is John Cena invisible?
That's so corny.
and so later he does then he tries like the exact same move, and this time he connects. And so Cena's like, "Whoa!" And so
Nakamura, does he do the two fingers to the eyes?
No. He makes these like big googly eyes on his face, like, "Oh, okay. I can see you after all."
That's pretty good. But speaking of John Cena running with that meme, I love how far he takes it. Like you've probably seen this before. This was several months back. It was sometime last year. But there was like I forgot some model of new smartphone had like face recognition technology, and John Cena tweeted that like it didn't seem to be working for him, and it took everybody a second. But when they got it, they were like, ah.
Yeah, this happens a lot, like on certain indie matches. Like a lot of times, guys will like fuck up and they'll do a move when nobody's around them, or they'll like receive a move and they're like, "Whoa! I didn't know John Cena was in the indies."
It's so corny. I love that.
It happened most recently because there's a move called like the flare flop, which is something that Ric Flair is really famous for. Okay. He's famous for like taking a move, like getting hit by something, and then like pretending like he didn't get hurt, and then like walking a couple steps and then just like flopping on the ground.
Oh, fair enough. That's such a cartoon thing to do. Like, haha, they're just like, you're unconscious.
But like there have been times like when Hulk Hogan is notorious for being the kind of guy who like really chews the scenery and like backstage politics and is like always the center of attention.
Yeah.
So and like everybody, he's the Poochie of WCW. Like they act like everything's supposed to be built around him. Everybody's supposed to be talking about him all the time. Even, well, I mean, like I always think of that one scene where they're like, when Poochie's on the screen, people should be asking, "Where's Poochie?"
Yeah,
Hulk Hogan had that kind of aura around him where, like, even when he didn't have the title, the whole show back in WCW was always built around him, and he always demanded that was the case. So, like, people would sell hilariously. They would just, like, overdo it. Like, if they knew that backstage they were being commanded to sell moves for Hulk Hogan, they would oversell it ridiculous, like, cartoonishly.
Oh, that's great.
Like, so, like, Flair would do that. There's a gif somewhere of him, like, taking a move from Hogan and then just, like, walking halfway up the ramp before he did the flare flop.
Nice.
So, on the indies, there was a guy who tried to do the flare flop, but he, like, over-rotated and just, like, spiked his head into the ground.
Ooh.
And so that's where someone was like, whoa, John Cena did a DDT to this guy on the on the independent circuit. And
Wait,
like,
I've heard that abbreviation. I'm sorry. What does DDT stand for?
Well, I mean, it's DDT as in, like, the insect repellent originally. Like,
oh.
But the move is just, like, you grab a guy around the neck and just spike his head into the mat.
Okay.
It was originally the finisher, sort of best known for being the finisher of Jake the Snake Roberts. And I guess like he was supposed to be like a really cerebral wrestler because he was a heel most of the time. Mm-hmm. And the idea was like he's literally attacking the opponent's head by just like spiking them into the mat. That's it doesn't stand. I don't think it stands for anything in particular, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
Sometimes they stand for things, but they're backronyms, so it's hard to tell. Like John Cena, his signature finisher is called the STF, and it stands for something, but what it actually stands for is meaningless because it originally used to be called the STFU. Back when he was like a young heel, and they just cut the U off to make it more PG friendly.
Okay, that's kind of amusing, actually.
And then they made up an acronym for it later. And his finisher right now is called the AA for the Attitude Adjustment, and it used to be called the FU. He was extremely immature.
That's pretty great.
Yep. So the big story from the Royal Rumble was that they had the first women's Royal Rumble, which was really enjoyable to watch, because most of the women who used to wrestle back in the 90s in the Attitude Era, they're still, in the 90s. I mean, the WWF only recently started taking the women seriously. So usually they used to just hire women who were fitness models who weren't really very good wrestlers just to had like big fake boobs, just to hang out and parade in front of the crowd and not really do a lot, just have a match, just a lot of hair pulling and sometimes a lot of like clothes tearing and things like that. Just like real lowest common denominator kind of stuff, like basically like a stage above mud wrestling. Sometimes
I was actually thinking that. It's like, well...
Sometimes actual mud wrestling on national television. Yeah, they've definitely done. They have not been afraid to stoop that low and possibly lower.
Okay.
But like that, I won't relate those stories now. But like a lot of these women, they had a really short shelf life because they were basically just being hired to parade themselves out when they were like in their early 20s, and then once they, after a few years, they would just get tired of them and fire them and hire somebody else, or the women would get sick of being degraded in this way, and they would just find better employment.
Yeah.
Because they knew that backstage nobody was taking them seriously, and sometimes if they were non-white, like a lot of the guys backstage are super racist. So like they had this really top-notch women's wrestler, Gail Kim, who was Korean, I believe. She's Korean, but she's actually from Canada. She's of Korean descent, but she's Canadian.
Okay.
And so people will be confused backstage that she didn't know like Japanese or something, and And Vince McMahon was originally convinced to hire her because somebody started showing him like porn of Japanese women.
That's classy.
And he's like, "What?"
And
he's
like, reminds me of.
And he didn't believe that there was porn of Japanese women. He didn't find them attractive, so he didn't believe that other men watching WWF would find Oriental women attractive. So
just,
he had to be
just imagine that though. Like, just take a second to step back. Like Japan, would not have porn of Japanese women. Like, any country would not have porn of, like, its own citizens. Well, like, what?
More so that other people in America also, like, partook of this porn and would watch. So, but I mean, that's fucked up by itself, that he had to be convinced to hire this woman by being shown porn of people who weren't even her nationality.
That's absurd.
It's like,
that actually reminds me of, not anywhere, like, to this level of depravity offensive, but that reminds me of, like, a really early episode of King in the Hill, maybe even the first one, I don't remember, when they first introduced the neighbor Khan, from Laos, and that was that whole thing where he's like, so are you Chinese or Japanese? It is like, I'm Laotian, and he goes into this long explanation of where Laos is and what language he speaks, and like, it's just like Zoolander, like, but why male models? It's like, so are you Chinese or Japanese? It's just like, ugh, and that's just how the scene ends.
So on that topic, I heard that in 2020, the U.S. Census Bureau is actually going to start asking people, like, what their country of origin is. So it'll be the first time that, like, white people will finally know what it's like to be asked, so where are you really from?
No, that actually is interesting, though, because, like, this isn't discussed so much, but, like, just as you can't, like, saying black is an easy thing to say because it's like, oh, they look that color, but like there's more than one country. It's not like all black people are the same. The same thing applies for white people. Like, I'm of Austrian descent. I can't just say I'm American, all white people are American, and all American people are white. It's like, that's not how it works. There are, like, America used to be racist against the Irish, and they're even whiter than fucking we are. So like, what does that even mean? Like, there's a lot of history going on that just, it's just kind of not really discussed that often, or at least not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, obviously it's really... Like, imagine a lot of black Americans, they were brought over because their ancestors came over on slave ships, which means they probably have no idea where they came from.
Yeah, I was about to say, came over. That's what happened. Yeah, slave ships, there you go. I was like, they did not feel like coming over.
So it's actually a really complicated thing to talk about, you're right, and it's probably far beyond the purview of this podcast. But like in this specific case, this woman, Gail Kim, she had always felt miserable backstage, and she actually, she literally walked out in the middle of a match. She was in a battle royal, like the Royal Rumble, and she just left. She just walked out, eliminated herself. The announcers were super confused, and she just walked out and she quit.
Damn, that's I gotta say though, that's a pretty badass way of doing it.
I know, right?
In front of everybody, like, fuck all y'all.
In front of a national audience, like that's quite one way to show your displeasure.
That's like when you catch those like viral videos where like a newscaster has just had enough. Like, fuck it, I'm talking about this now. And it's like, whoa, on TV, like that's kind of amazing.
Right, so that's why it's nice that the division has finally gotten like the spotlight that it deserves, because a lot of these women were even some of the legends, some of the veteran women from the 90s, they got to come back. All of their at most of them are in their like late 30s, early 40s. All of them can still wrestle if they so desire. Just they have other better things to do than to debase themselves for the average WWF audience.
Yeah.
But we got to see them go toe to toe with all these newer women who are being taken who are fantastic and talented wrestlers, and got to see them stare each other down. Got to wrestle a little bit. Got to see some of the women who are still active from that time period. We got to see them like revisit some old rivalries. There were a lot of like really cool moments, and all these women got to say they got to be in a Royal Rumble, which they never got to say when they were originally part of the WWF back during the Attitude Era.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Although I will say this though, like I don't know how the WWF WWE like actually works. Like, you would have a better sense of this than I would because you follow them over a period of time, and I'm just hearing about this one point, so I don't know if there's a precedence or what. But I do hope that this doesn't turn into like, I'm not racist, I have a black friend. Like, see, we had a Women's Royal Rumble, we did it, we're progressive now. Like, I do hope that they actually follow through with this kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, you're totally right, and I hope that they have it every year, because it could be really interesting. But, I mean, it's something that's been building, actually, for quite some time. I guess the first, like, really big moment was when they rebranded what used to be the Divas division as just the women's division. So
that's a good point. And you've also mentioned even Southpaw. Like, part of the humor of Southpaw is making fun of just how backwards they were in the 80s. Like, especially with season 2 of Southpaw, like, a woman wrestler, that's impossible. It must be a small man. And it's just funny to see how, like, man, they really were kind of like that back then. But at the same time, on one hand, it's good to laugh at yourself about, like, well, I've learned. But at the same time, don't think that means you're woke now. Like, you still have a ways to go.
Yes, only Matt Hardy is truly woken.
Touche. I'm sorry I said anything. Yeah.
So, like, what would be interesting is if they have the guts to have a women's match main event WrestleMania. And if they're going to do that, like this might actually be the year, because the last closing shot of this pay-per-view was a fucking Ronda Rousey coming out, who, you know,
I heard about that. Yeah.
She. So this might have been like the stupidest thing that I've ever seen. She just came out. She pointed at the WrestleMania sign, which is what you do. It's like the meme when you're on the road to WrestleMania, basically starting at the Royal Rumble. There's always this fucking sign of the WrestleMania logo at every event that the WWF does for the next like 2 months. And all the people do is they point at the sign when they're competing for a championship match or like a spot in a match that's going to be on the WrestleMania card. They're always just pointing at the fucking sign all the time. So like Nakamura, when he won his Royal Rumble, which was not the main event, the women's Royal Rumble was the main event of the pay-per-view. So like after he won, he challenged one of the title holders to a match. That's the point of the Royal Rumble. You get a shot at a match. You get your choice of a title match at WrestleMania.
Okay.
So he's got his number one contendership now. And he pointed at the sign and he left. So Rousey, she just like after the match was already over, it was won by Asuka, who is
you mentioned her. She was like a winner just all the time.
She has never been pinned or submitted. She's been in the WWF for 2.5 years.
Damn.
She has never lost a match. It is unbelievable, and I can't even fucking imagine what they would do now. They were telling this really interesting story where she might have lost while she was down in NXT. She had held their developmental title in NXT for over 500 days, and they were telling this kind of interesting story where she was wrestling the challenger, and she was just getting increasingly cocky and overconfident, like and more heel-like each successive match, and they were building to this story, but then she got hurt. So they took the title off of her and they brought her up to the main roster after she recovered. So that never really got a payoff, but she did get to keep her undefeated streak. Mm-hmm. And so, like, what are they gonna fucking do? Who is gonna fucking beat Asuka? She's been undefeated and she's actually got a longer undefeated streak than Goldberg.
Jesus.
Who used to have the record, and Goldberg's record was made up. Like the WCW, when he was building the streak, they never really kept track of it, which actually was a pain in the ass for the fans, because it was one of the handful of things the fans could actually get excited about while WCW was burning to the ground, was they could follow Goldberg's streak. But if WCW just made the numbers up, then even the fans who were invested in that couldn't their signs would just be wrong when they brought them to the events. So that streak was artificially inflated, and Asuka actually beat it legitimately just by
Jesus
by wrestling. I think it's over 200 matches now.
That's ridiculous.
Without losing. So she won the Royal Rumble, of course, because she wins and she's still over. People still fucking love her.
Cool.
She's incredible. So she's not done yet. But yeah, she comes out and she's picking which of the women's titles she wants to wrestle for. And fucking Ronda Rousey just walks out like she just showed up late to the party and points at the sign and shakes Stephanie McMahon's hand. And there's all this stuff going on Twitter after this where it's like, gee, if I had known that all I had to do was show up after the match and point at the sign, I wouldn't have entered the fucking Royal Rumble in the first place.
That's pretty great.
So
the one thing I'm curious, though, regarding Ronda Rousey, her sort of meta career, her previous career in MMA and stuff, because the thing is, she was a freaking beast in the MMA ring, but then she had that loss, and she took it really badly, and she was talking on the Ellen DeGeneres show, Ellen, about it and everything. It was a major psychological, just issue to deal with for her. Mm-hmm. So she was out of the game for a while, and then when she went back, when she felt like she was back in fighting condition, she went back into the ring. But a lot of people were saying you don't want to go to a high level match after cooling off for an extended period of time, because it's just like Rocky 3. You don't want to fight somebody who has the eye of the tiger when you don't. And then She lost that too. So that was the big return. And then she lost quickly, surprisingly quickly. Mm-hmm. And then she kind of disappeared again for a while, off of social media. So I'm wondering if she's the one to break the Asuka streak. I'm kind of wondering how that would work. Would that be oh man, finally she got the big break? Or if it's going to be would it feel weird? Because I know that Ronda Rousey was in MMA, you can fight with whatever the hell style. For example, she lost to a boxer, but her style is kind of ground game, and seems like it would kind of overlap with wrestling to a degree, but it would feel weird to be like, I'm going to try wrestling now, and she beats the 200-time winner, undefeated champion. Like, that would feel a little like, you can just do that?
Yeah, so, I mean, they would basically be playing off of her reputation previously.
Yeah.
Like, you know, Brock Lesnar, he went to UFC for a while, then he came back to WWE, and that was after he had lost, legitimately, the UFC title that he held, as a result of the fact that he had diverticulitis that gave him this extra weakness where you could just punch him in the stomach and he was just like violently ill. You know, he just wasn't at 100% during the end of his UFC career. So Rousey, she doesn't really have that excuse, but also she never really, I think, hit her skill ceiling because she never really fought anybody early on that challenged her, and what I've always heard is that her camp never really pushed her to evolve as a fighter.
Okay.
So those two losses, they just got to her. It's not like fucking anime where you lose and then you train really hard and you come back and you win.
Well, no, like I said, she made a point of that. She said she was having like really depressive thoughts and things like that after, I don't know about the second loss, but certainly the first.
So what would be more interesting, I think, is that if she takes loss that badly, and that seems to be the narrative that she's trying to play, like if she starts wrestling and she just isn't received by the fans in the way that the WWF is going to portray her, like how is she going to react to that? She signed like a multi-year deal exclusively with the WWE.
Wow.
She has always been a huge wrestling fan. Her nickname, she was close friends with Roddy Piper.
Oh,
who
wow.
You probably know from They Live, but was better known.
I think I might have been familiar with him with wrestling before They Live, but clearly I know him from the "What Would You Do for a Klondike Bar" commercial. Obviously.
Well, yeah, I mean
that's what he's from.
He's quite the pop culture icon.
Yes.
So she's called Rowdy Ronda Rousey. She picked up the epithet from Roddy Piper.
Oh, okay.
And she actually came out wearing his jacket. She was gifted it from Piper's son.
That's cool.
So,
and apparently Piper was like a cool guy too.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. A lot of these guys, like, they were nice when you met them, but they turned out to be like gigantic assholes when you hear about their backstory.
Enough.
I don't want to say anybody in wrestling is a saint. Maybe some of the newer guys are like I like Chris Jericho a lot. He seems like just a genuinely nice guy. But if I found out tomorrow that like he had an affair with his wife while he was drinking at a bar somewhere, I just wouldn't be surprised either.
Okay, yeah.
You know. So, plus, like, a lot of these guys were on cocaine half the time, especially in the 80s.
In the 80s, yeah.
Like, you never fucking know what they were up to.
Yeah.
So Rousey, she came out, nobody knows who she's supposed to be wrestling at WrestleMania, but if there is a women's match that could conceivably main event WrestleMania, it would probably involve Ronda Rousey in some fashion.
Mm-hmm.
So, originally, she actually showed up at WrestleMania like completely out of the blue 3 years ago. She came out of the stands with The Rock, and it was not advertised at all. She was still under contract with UFC. She was still actively fighting with the UFC. She hadn't had her first loss yet, so she was like 100% Super Saiyan Ronda Rousey. She had no defeats under her belt at all.
And like all of her victories were like in like something stupid, like 10 seconds or fewer. It's like, god damn, or 20 seconds. It was like really fast.
Yes, most of her, I think she had one fight that went a couple rounds, but most of her victories were by submission in like less than 30 seconds. And
yeah, it was ridiculous.
It also probably meant that her division was pretty weak, and that like once they started bringing in fighters who could stand toe to toe with her, who could exploit her weaknesses, then she lost.
Well, and like what you were saying, by the way, this reminds me of like regarding not being able to hit that skill ceiling. I'm actually reminded of not wrestling, but like, you know, Hajime no Ippo, like the boxing anime. Like, I know it's a freaking anime, but the logic still applies. Like, there was one, like, I think the number 2 guy in the featherweight division was just like, he was like a Mike Tyson style monster who just like kills you like immediately, and Ippo was able to beat him because he could stand up to him for a little while, and the guy was so used to just destroying his opponents instantly that he hadn't built up longevity. Like, he didn't know what it was like to fight for a long time and actually get tired.
Right.
So I wonder if that could be a thing for Ronda Rousey as well.
So,
if she kills everybody immediately, like, what about somebody who could actually deal with it?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because Ippo like got injured in a fight and retired.
Oh, well. I did not know that.
Really anticlimactically.
Oh.
Like, partially as a result. So, like, people say that his career arc actually mirrored Mike Tyson. So like Tyson, like so Ipo's boxing style is modeled after Mike Tyson in a lot of ways. So he uses what's called like the peekaboo style, where his fists go like all the way up by his face, and he tries really hard to be reactive, but he's also notorious for being able to take a punch. Tyson used to be an extremely skill-based boxer, and he wouldn't just rely on the knockout punch like Ippo often does until his first trainer passed away. And like Don King got a little bit too much in his ear, and he started becoming a little bit too much of a sensationalist boxer. And his career slowly started. And on top of that, he's a rapist. He went to jail. That also is something that should not be forgotten. And had a substantial impact on his career because it put him in prison for several years. Not that is what we should be focusing on. It's not surprising that he. And actually,
even stupidly to bring this back to video games, that's the reason why on the original Nintendo Entertainment System, you can buy Mike Tyson's Punch-Out and you can buy Punch-Out, which has Mike Tyson replaced with Mr. Dream.
Yep.
It's basically the same game, but like there's politics behind it.
Literally, well, I mean, it's I wouldn't call it politics.
Well, it's not yet the law behind it, yeah. So I mean, like in a sense of like we don't want to sponsor you anymore.
So like that's sort of what I'm getting at, just sort of the tail end of this discussion, is that like it's actually a little bit frustrating that Mike Tyson, being like an actual convicted rapist, still like gets like Adult Swim cartoon shows and all these like
that is true. Like he still is generally well received.
It probably wouldn't happen anymore. Like I hope that because of this whole Me Too thing, at least in the Hollywood side, we might have finally passed the point where this is no longer acceptable. Not that like
would be nice.
Should have fucking happened 100 years ago, but like
I know, like even a lot of the Me Too movement is talking about stuff that happened 20, 30 years ago when when nobody would listen. So like it's not even like blowing the whistle on a guy right now. It's like calling back these like things in the past that have just been allowed to continue. It's just like it's really like disturbing.
So that's sort of like what's another thing that's interesting to me about this is that like the WWF, they're getting all this mainstream attention as a result of it, and I don't know if this is a good time for it from their perspective. Because so for Rousey, for example, she is extremely transphobic. She has given.
I had heard about that.
She's made a lot of personal statements that are just beyond the pale. I've been told, although I have not vetted this yet, that she has been quoted as saying that she believes the Sandy Hook thing was staged. She's one of those conspiracy theorists. Apparently, this is really common among MMA fighters. They're not well known.
That's an oddly specific thing.
They're not like well known. Well, I mean, once one person believes it, it's kind of a closed circle. So I guess
in the workplace,
it transmits. And these people are not. They're not known for their intellect. Or they're like some of them are very well spoken and very intelligent. Conor McGregor, if you listen to him talk, he seems like a very smart person, even though he has all these affectations of like this egotistical boxer. He sounds like an extremely intelligent guy, and obviously he makes really good business decisions for himself. So he must have at least a high degree of common sense. But some of the shit that comes out of these people's mouths, like I don't fucking know where. And like,
what decade is this?
You wonder if all this shit's gonna get dredged up now that Rousey is wrestling at fighting, or I don't know what you call it. She is participating in WrestleMania. Yeah, like the biggest pop culture / wrestling event of the year. And on top of that, like stories are starting to come out about Vince McMahon, right? Like,
well, wasn't there already like a lot of implied like. I bet there's stuff going on, like shady stuff with him anyway. Because he's the head of of WWF, right? So like, and you always refer to the WWF's like attitude towards, this race, that ethnicity, this sex, and he's the guy running the show. So you'd think a lot of it would come from him anyway, right?
So it turns out in 2006, for example, he was indicted by the cops. Mm-hmm. He was almost brought to prosecution for a rape case. In Florida or something. Like he allegedly tried to rape somebody in a tanning salon, and the police thought there was sufficient evidence to bring it to prosecution, but the prosecutors just didn't follow through on it. And in the 90s, there was a settlement where a wrestler who came in at the age of 19 to work at the WWF, he was molested by multiple people backstage, and he had this huge settlement and he left. And he says that like the only reason why he stayed at all was because his brother was there. Mm-hmm. So like this kind of stuff, it happened, and there was the steroid trials in the 90s where they got brought to federal court for distributing steroids to the wrestlers, and somehow they managed to the WWF has been like weirdly bulletproof, despite the fact that like there's some dark shit in its past that just from the stuff that we know about, not even talking about things that happen behind the scenes that have not yet been brought to light. So, you know, it's one of those things where, like, as much as I enjoy watching wrestling, if we saw the shackles come off, you know, and some of these people get what this negative influence that McMahon has had on the business in his own way for decades, you know, and to have some new fresh blood take over, you know, who didn't have this kind of baggage, who wasn't a criminal, who wasn't arguably, you know, a serial sexual assaulter. Like, I don't even know what to call it. Like, because
that might even be the word.
Yeah, like, so, like, to see how this is going to shake out, I am kind of curious. Or you know, nothing could happen, and WrestleMania will come and go, and we'll just go back to enjoying wrestling.
Yeah, and well, that's the thing that's really frustrating, though, is that, like, I mean, well, this is the whole reason, like, probably with wrestling too, but, like, certainly with Hollywood, this is probably the reason a lot of this stuff has been allowed to continue. Like, they do provide us with really good entertainment. I do love watching these movies, and it's not happening to me or anyone I know, so maybe I'll look the other way for, like, 30 years. And, like, you know, that's the whole thing. So, like, you know, I do love watching cool movies, but at the same time, even if it makes radical changes that people may not like, even if there are movie producers or, you know, wrestling, whatever you call them, the people who run the wrestling companies, even if there are those people who, like, may not be as popular and maybe not even are necessarily as talented, like, you gotta clean this shit out sometime. Like, what are you gonna do? Just wait for them to die and just nothing happens? Like, you gotta deal with it. Like, it's like a Band-Aid. Like, nobody likes taking a Band-Aid off, but the longer you take for it, ironically, the worse it is. Just tear this shit off, hate yourself, and then love yourself for making the right decision.
So, like, part of the reason why I like Jericho personally is because I heard a story back in the day where two of the women who were wrestling, they put on what was supposedly a pretty good match on television, and then when they got backstage, they were told that the match was too good and it made the men look bad, so they should wrestle worse next time.
Yeah, I remember you had said something.
Yeah,
like
and Jericho is one of the handful of people who said, you know, well, like, if the women are out wrestling us, then we should probably try harder to beat them. And why is it so bad anyway if the women are out wrestling us? Why is it such a big deal?
Yeah,
and apparently it's not a common attitude. So, like, that's
the other thing. Like, yeah, if literally the plan is to lower your quality, like, maybe you need a new plan. Like, this isn't quite the same thing, but it reminds me of well, actually, two things. One is way more real, just the concept of victim blaming. It's like, you know, like, oh, I can't believe you would leave your door unlocked. You're just asking to be robbed. Whose fault is that? It's like, I don't know, the guy who fucking robbed me. Like, you know, wouldn't it be nice if we could live in a world where we could leave our doors unlocked? But in the meantime, stealing is still illegal. Leaving your door open is not recommended, but not against the fucking law. But for a more humorous example, this kind of ties in a little bit less than that one, so that's why I'm using it a little later. But I might have mentioned this before, but you know the movie Armageddon, where Bruce Willis and some, like, you know, just down-to-earth, you know, guys just working on an oil rig were sent up into space to drill...
Yes, I've seen Armageddon.
Yeah. So these guys were sent up in space to drill a hole in an asteroid to prevent this cataclysm from happening. And behind the scenes, Ben Affleck was talking to Michael Bay, and he said this in the DVD commentary. Apparently, this is like a really good commentary to listen to, and I kind of want to listen to it now. But Ben Affleck had asked Michael Bay, instead of grabbing a bunch of oil drillers and teaching them to be astronauts, with, by the way, the implication they have to do months and months of, like, physical and mental training, but instead of taking these oil drillers and teaching them to be astronauts, couldn't you just take a bunch of astronauts and teach them how to drill? And Michael Bay was basically just like, shut up. And it's just like, well, wait a second, hold on.
It's like, trust the process.
Like, it wouldn't be as fun of a movie to watch, maybe, with these guys, you know, coming up. They went from, you know, just random people to, like, whoa, world savior. But, like, still, it would make way more sense to just teach astronauts how to drill, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, so, like, on the wrestling side, from a storyline perspective, like, a lot of the time, for, like, a less skilled heel to win, oftentimes they have to use, like tricks to beat the face, right? And occasionally the heel does have to win just to keep the possibility open that it can happen. Sure. But it has to be obvious enough a lot of the time that the audience, especially, like, all the way up in the nosebleeds, can see what's happening, or that it can come across on television screen.
That's true, yeah.
Like, the problem oftentimes is that a lot of times it's just, like, completely unbelievable that anybody would fall for these stupid tricks, right? Like, like, usually it's on the referee like, how could you miss that the guy has a wrench in his hand and is like whacking the guy with it? Like,
that
how
is a
could you
good point. Yeah, like it's very much like it just makes me think of. I'm actually thinking the first Captain America movie specifically, the Captain America: The First Avenger, like in the MCU. But in any case, it reminds me of like events like that are plays for kids, where like the villain is making very exaggerated tiptoeing moments and like giggling to himself with his hand over his mouth, like hee 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 hee. So the audience clearly sees him. How the hell does nobody else see him? Like, it just makes me think of stuff like that. Like, it's just for you. It's a meta thing. You're not supposed to know. Even though wrestling does try to pull, like they want to make the matches look like they're at least somewhat for real. Oh, he cheated with a wrench, but I could see how he'd get away with it. But there are some things where you really might have to suspend your disbelief.
So from the perspective of like the camera, at least in the Royal Rumble, like one of the most common things is that a heel will hide. They'll like roll out of the ring because going over the top rope is what eliminates you. They'll roll out under the bottom, and they'll just kind of hide on the apron, like around the side of the ring.
That's kind of
on
clever.
The back where the camera, like the hard camera, the one that shows the main view of the ring, can't really see you. So then you just like reappear at an opportune moment to eliminate one of the major faces.
Sure.
And usually that like starts off a mid-card feud, like to have to say like, oh, I eliminated you from the Royal Rumble, and then the face will come back for revenge. But the problem with that is sometimes they forget, like the camera guys will forget, and when they show them brawling on the outside, sometimes they'll forget they're not supposed to go down below a certain level, and you'll see the guy just like hiding in the corner.
That's funny.
He like a lot of the time he can't quite get under the ring, so you'll see him like, don't pay any attention to me.
So the ref doesn't see it, but the camera guy like basically it has to be our little secret now.
But there's a great one of Randy Orton where he got like beat up before a match, and he was supposed to be knocked out for the rest of the episode. So like the camera at one point catches him, he like gets up, and he whispers to the fan. He's like, "Is the show over yet? Can I get up?" Because he can't see from where he is.
That's fantastic.
And, like, he has no visual cues because everybody else around the ring is also supposed to be knocked out. So nobody can sign to him that it's his time, that he can get up and he can leave.
That's amazing. But no, that almost makes me think of an episode of The Office, where you first meet Andy, the guy played by Ed Helms, when he just goes into like this. Like, Jim had been playing this prank on him that just went too far, and Andy just exploded. And he's like, who the hell did this? I'm going to find who did this. And the camera guy knows, because we've been watching Jim do the thing, because the whole gimmick with The Office is that it's a mockumentary. So, like, yes, the cameraman is kind of a character on the show. There is actually a dude with a camera filming everything that goes on in The Office. So, like, there's a part where, like, the camera pans over to Jim, and Jim looks at the camera and has this frantic head shake, like look somewhere else, like oh shit, like, it just makes me think of that.
Nice. So yeah, actually, so it's one of the reasons they have NXT. So they have all these guys like Nakamura who come up from Japan, and he's like 38 by the time he comes to the WWE. You wouldn't think that he needs to go down to developmental.
Yeah.
But just like learning to position yourself for the camera and to like play to the television audience that doesn't exist because like it just isn't a consideration for like big Japanese broadcasts. Like most of them are closed circuit or pay-per-view, so you don't have this live television audience. And like learning to play for that audience is something that takes a while to like understand.
I'm sure it does. That's something I never really thought of. Like it does make perfect sense, but just without thinking about it, I always just kind of assumed the wrestlers just do what they do, and the camera guys know what to film and when, as opposed to like, oh, I should stand here because the camera can't move for this part or such and such. Like, that actually is, there's a lot going on.
So there's a women's wrestler, Paige, and one of her biggest accomplishments is that they actually gave her the title on her first day up from NXT, out of developmental. And so she won it from AJ Lee, who is, I don't know if you know her, but she's also CM Punk's wife.
Okay.
So she hits her finisher, and then she gets the pin, and then she's like, oh shit, I'm not facing the hard camera. So like while the referee is counting, you can see her like trying to like scooch over a little bit, just like... and it's incredibly awkward because what winds up happening is that like she misses, like the way she's doing the pin, she just like basically shoves AJ's butt into the camera. Like, to make sure that they get the shot, and it's like really, it's not intentionally gratuitous, like, because you can't. I do not believe that was her intent at all.
Yeah, that's just like this goofy flub, like smooth,
just like
well done.
It looks really bizarre. So
that's pretty silly.
Anyway, that's all I got for the Royal Rumble. I don't know if you have any closing thoughts on professional wrestling.
I can't say that I have many. Your talks are entertaining as always. That's kind of what I got.
I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I'll be happy to come back and talk more about it later.
Yay!
So
we should do this more often. Just you and me, and no other no Vice allowed, no Pyro allowed, no Minty Mitts allowed, no anybody.
Well, I think Minty Mitts would be a little bit upset.
Yeah, she's literally in the room with you right now.
I'm not that worried about Vice and Pyro. They're big boys. They can take care of themselves.
And Minty Mitts isn't a boy at all.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, at one point sometime soon we should do an Undercast.
Oh, totally. That'd be super cool. And again, we should talk exclusively about Undertale, and everyone would be like, haven't I seen this already? And we'll be like, I don't care. And
exactly. And Minty Mitts can do the entire thing in the Pepper's voice.
Perfect. I know why you call me. It's like still like my favorite line. That was like the greatest delivery.
Oh, King Fluffy Bun.
It's a door.
Name for beans.
It's a door. Try using it. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. Those are. You can't name for beans.
Yep, that's. So for those of you who are not familiar, there are a couple of voice acting, quote unquote voice acting segments from the Undertale Let's Play that Lotus Prince has sent both of us personally to use as ringtones involving our own voice acting.
That just struck me as funny. Yeah.
So yeah,
fantastic.
You know, go back and watch the Undertale Let's Play and see if you can spot our not our outtakes but our amazing voice acting that hopefully you'll see again if we ever do something like 999.
Dude, I would love to do some kind of visual novel like 999 or Phoenix Wright or Roulette or like whatever the hell. Like there's a bunch to choose from at this point. And I would love to do 999. I'm overdue on that one.
Let's get on it, but that's a later episode. Until then,
this is our for another day.
This is our show for the week. Please remember to subscribe to the Corrective Consciousness YouTube and SoundCloud pages. While there, please give us thumbs up, likes, and 5-star ratings on iTunes. Well, I mean, don't give us 5-star iTunes ratings on SoundCloud. Give them to us on iTunes.
Yeah, preferably on iTunes. Yes.
Yes, on the right sites. Visit all the sites and give us all the thumbs up and likes and hosannas. It helps us promote
and what?
Hosannas.
I don't even know what that means.
Look it up. It helps us promote and spread awareness of the show, and any bit of encouragement keeps the show going. You can also catch us on Tuesday for our sister podcast, Corrective Consciousness. On Tuesday, we might actually have people on the show.
I really do hope that Vice listens to this whole thing before finishing
the podcast about our lives and pop culture. Finally, you can friend me as OldManStompy on most major gaming and social media networks, except for Steam, where I don't want to be found, so don't bother. And you can also find me on the WWE Network.
Yeah, and you can find me on my YouTube channel, Lotus Prince. You can hit me up on Twitter at Lotus Prince. And finally, if you are interested in seeing my videos early, getting in on exclusive live streams, or even selecting upcoming games for me to Let's Play, then perhaps consider swinging by my Patreon account, which can be found at patreon.com/LotusPrince.
And especially pay attention to the YouTube page, because some of us, I think Pyro and I, and a couple of other people who have actually played through the entire Danganronpa series are thinking about doing an extended episode on the show, which Vice and Lotus have not played all the way through, so they will not be privy to it, nor will they listen to it. So
yeah, that's the thing. I can't listen to it for fear of spoilers, so I hope that it actually is a Danganronpa podcast, and it's not just all three of you just like, you know who's stupid? Lotus and Vice. Like, God damn it, they fooled me again. Just the entire thing.
I don't
understand. OldManStompy sent me a file that's like 15 seconds long. Hey Lotus, you suck. That's the whole file.
It's damn you. So I will say that I was tempted, since Mr. Ryu is such a big Monster Hunter fan, to when the PC game came out to like release a little meme video titled like, I've waited 8 months to do this, and just like have a video of myself buying a copy of Monster Hunter for the PC, taking it all the way home, and then right when I'm about to put it in my computer, just like turn around and like toss it in the toilet.
Yeah, I was thinking throw it in the garbage immediately.
It occurred to me the biggest problem with this plan is that since it's the PC release, it probably won't come out in a physical version at all.
And even if it does, PC's just been delayed and delayed.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, look forward to all of our hijinks, and hopefully it might actually be a Danganronpa podcast. I swear someday it might actually come out. Yeah, just like the 999 Let's Play that I promise every single time we talk about it.
And just like Danganronpa 2 with me and Pyro, like, at some point, I guess, do it.
And just like everything else that we promise will eventually be attached to this podcast besides the podcast.
Yeah. So far, I think my worst promises for delivery have been... Well, I haven't made a public promise about Danganronpa 2. Like, I've said in the comments, oh, yeah, I'm doing it, but it's just, like, it is just not happening with our work schedules and our distance. Like, I want to see when I can next advance that. But probably my worst promise has been the Resident Evil 1 comparison video, because like that was literally a year overdue. I finally delivered. I did deliver on my promise, but like, oof, it was awkward.
and all it took was the pressure of presenting at a major gaming convention.
Yeah, so would you like to do your panel? Oh shit, I have 2 weeks to do this like hour-long video with I don't even know how much video and like 20 to 30 hours of editing. Like, oh fuck, thank God it's summer vacation or winter vacation.
And if you were paying attention during the outro, then you will know exactly where you can watch it on his YouTube page.
Whoa!
At Lotus Prince. Go get him on the Twitter. And you can find our other colleagues at Vice the Bold, that's VYSEBOLD, on most major, on Steam, PSN, Xbox Live, Twitter, and Battle.net.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find Power Jack Frost, I don't know, somewhere.
I don't know. Wasn't he Cloud 08540?
Is it?
I think
well,
he was
why don't you finish it off?
Cloud 085. I think it was Cloud 08540. I don't have the outro sheet on me because I just talked to him on Facebook, so I don't need these.
Well, like, it's not on the outro sheet, so I guess we have some homework for Pyro.
Oh no! I guess you can't find them anywhere. It's over forever.
It's fine. Anyway, see you all on Tuesday, everyone.
if Vice hasn't fired the two of us. Until next time, everyone.
Cheers.